Cassidy, Jack.
We're
I am,
neighbors, for Christ's sake.
and we are neighbors. And look at this setup you have behind you. I'm trying to figure out if it's more a studio or more a gym. It's kind of both,
Both.
isn't it?
I just used the gym this morning, and I used the studio the other day. So there you go. Right next to
It's
my board is my gym. So it makes sense to me.
so how much time do you spend in it as a gym daily, would you say?
Well, when I'm home, I I try to get 2 to 3 days in the gym and 2 days out down at the mighty Pacific Ocean at Marina Del Rey for a 30-mile bike ride. So try to get two 30-mile bike rides in and then 3 days at the gym if that's a good week. Obviously, that doesn't happen every week, but that's a good week. In general, if I can get in a good aggressive 3 days a week, I'm happy. But if I can get 5 days, I'm really happy. But being
Wow.
luckily still being a working musician with my friend Jorma Kalkinen and as Hot Tuna, we're working and we're actually out on the road. We just finished a month long tour uh, where both Jorma and I drove our own vehicles 4,600 miles, starting
Unbelievable.
behind the wheel ourselves, by God, old school. We started
Wow.
in Park City, Utah, on September 9th and finished October 10th in Las Cruces. And then I drove back from Phoenix, Las Cruces, on the 12th of October. Just got back.
Well, and I was blessed to see you in Santa Barbara, which
That's
was,
right. And you got to see us in Santa Barbara. I forgot about that. That's right.
and
And
I don't,
you got to meet Chester.
and I did get to meet Chester. You haven't gotten to meet Rufus, but we'll save that for another day. But I don't know if you know this. I talked about it with Yorma, but the first time I saw you guys was at the Fillmore East, and it was 52 years ago.
And what show was that?
It was
I mean,
52 years.
obviously, it was an airplane show, or was it a hot tuna show?
It was a hot tuna show.
Oh, that's great.
It was a hot tuna show, and it
That's
was
right. What I
52
remember about that venue is it was always just packed full of smoke.
smoke,
I
right?
mean,
It was.
you didn't need those smoke machines on stage. You could barely see, and that's what I remember a lot about it.
Okay, so I was asking Yorma this, and I want to ask your impression of it. But for me, having been to a shit ton of venues in my life, and you've been to way more, the Fillmore East,
Lupos.
the Fillmore East was a completely unique, and for me, still to this day, I think the greatest place I've ever seen shows. What was it like for you as a performer, the Fillmore East?
Well, it was great. It meant a lot of things, both to Yorm and I. I think because we're from the East Coast. We born and raised Washington D.C. and we had a little band together, as you know, in 1958. When we were, I was in junior high school, and he was in high. Went the days.
Was that the Triumphs?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
had a name for it, the
yeah.
Triumph. And I got a picture up on the wall, and I'm 15, 14 and a half, 15 years old, and Yorm is 17. And I can't get it down off the wall. I can't show you, but I'll shoot it to you sometime.
Well, okay, now
And
wait. Tell me your version of how did you meet Yorma?
well, let's finish the other question,
Okay, go ahead.
which I forgot. What do you
No, now you're telling me
Oh yeah,
that
New York City. Why did we like it? Yeah, my
yes.
impression of Filmore East. And so that whole East Coast thing of DC up to New York, that whole corridor that I played as a young musician in a bunch of beach bands, going up in Wildwood, New Jersey, and all that corridor going up, in the summertime, as a teenager playing in bands. Uh, that that East Coast in New York is just its home. Yorma spent time there while I was in college, in a work furlough program at Antioch. My first time going up to New York City, I think I was 16. Yorma was on a furlough from Antioch. Uh, I'm 3.5 years younger than Yorma, so I took my first train up to New York City. You know, got off got off the train, was at Penn Station, I guess, and walked up, onto the street level, and this guy had just gotten stabbed to death in front of me, falls down on the ground,
Holy.
and the cops are all around, and I watched the people in New York practically step over this guy to get around him and keep going to work. You know, welcome to New York City. So anyway, I visit Yorma up there, and we go to Gertie's Folk City and see
Mm.
Ray Davis and Sonny Terry and Brown and McGee and all these that early folk sing in the early '60s with the discovery of Dick Spotswood in D.C. Having to do with the discovery of Sun House and Mississippi John Hurt and all that folk revival that went on in the early college campuses that of course the Holy Modal Rounders and Dave Van Ronk, and then a young crop of people like Bob Dylan were starting to write their own music about their own time rather than singing about the 1890s or whatever, you know.
And I know you're a Pete
So,
Seeger fan. Did you ever get to see
yeah,
him?
absolutely. Yeah, I got to see Pete, absolutely. But I was a Pete Seeger fan, but I tell you, I was really a Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger fan.
Mm.
And I still upstairs have all the 10-inch LPs of that because I was uh, and later on in college I did a thesis on the child ballads and uh, and did a lot of discovery work about
You
English
did a
folk music and
thesis?
ballads. Yes, it is, anything to keep from doing other stuff in college. And it was fun. I go down to the Library of Congress and do all this research about cool music, so it was great. That was our Google. My Google back in those days, uh, and all through junior high. From I think the first time I went down to the Library of Congress, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. And you go
Wow.
into the music section there, and you take out 78s, and you go into a booth, and I'd listen to to rainforest music and from Africa to Iranian music to music from around the world. That's how I learned, and of course all the blues collections that came into being, the Harry Smith collections uh, and later on and to the all the the blues music that was later on gathered together by the label Yazoo and then put out on this new format called LPs.
Now I know you
That's how
picked,
old I am.
well, so am
Anyway,
I.
that corridor from D.C., which was
Hmm.
a famous uh, entity itself for a crossroads of so many styles of music. Of course, you go up and see in New York is where all the big cats were playing, and I'd see all this variety of kinds of music, uh, but I was lucky enough to get to see so many of the jazz greats in the late 50s, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62. All the great jazz players, Charles Mingus and Yusef Lateef and Roland Kirk and Scott LaFaro. You know, my all-time favorite in that genre uh, was Eric Dolphy. As a matter of fact, I just got a heavy vinyl uh, collection here, John Coltrane with Eric Dolphy, that was just released.
Hey, so my future son-in-law plays with Michelle Coltrane with his
Oh, that's fantastic.
yes, and they just came back from New York. They just did some shows there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yes.
I know I've rambled on here, but that era when came into being as the Jefferson Airplane and Hot Tuna, every time we go back to New York, it was really strange. We gained so many fans. That was really our hub when that kept us together and they were the fans that really listened to our progress as we developed as young musicians. And don't forget, we were young musicians,
Mhm.
learning our craft. And they're the ones that came to every year to every show and still do to this day to see how we reinterpret ourselves every year. And so, and then that's what was happening for us. Now, of course, we our entrance into New York as Jefferson Airplane, and through Bill Graham being our manager for about a year back in San Francisco, and then opening up the Filmore East, gave us a certain conduit into those venues that we benefited from immensely.
So, okay, so let's start at the beginning here. I know your dad had, I think, a banjo and a guitar up in your attic, right? But your father wasn't a musician per se. I mean, he
Well,
played, but
I
right?
mean, don't forget, most people in most homes had a musical instrument of some
But
sort,
usually a
and
piano,
and
right?
usually a piano. But then my father liked the Hammond organ, and he got in 1957 he bought a Hammond organ B3
Wow.
that's sitting right there. Yeah.
Wow.
And if you
Wow.
open up the lid on the Hammond organ, it shows the payment schedule.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Did he, and so how long did
So
it
he
take him to
played a
pay it
little bit.
off?
Yeah, I don't know. There's only one
Wow.
payment scheduled in it, so I don't know whether he paid it all off. And I have he he was
Wow.
he had that front first the piano, then that, and I was never drawn through the keyboard, but he'd lunge after the little hit of good old White Horse Bourbon. He'd lunge after the the uh, the Hammond B3, and play "Peg of My Heart" and things like that, And it's all full of sheet music in there from the of course
Wow.
the 20s, 30s, and 40s and all of that.
See, now I
But
want to jump all over the place. When you played with Hendrix, did you do a session with Mike Finnegan? I don't think you did when you were on
no, no,
no.
no. But I'll get to that. But
Okay.
but but in any case, uh, I was really fortunate. My father was a dentist, and his father, uh, Pop Casady, John Casady, who I'm named after, was an Irish uh, relief person. He worked on the Fox Theater and a lot of the great venues in Washington D.C. doing all that sculpted relief work that's up in the ceilings, all that plaster work.
Uh-huh.
And he was a worker. And he came, the Cassidys came, I believe, and it's kind of hard to find. There's not a lot of information out there. I've got a couple guys working on it, and one of my rabbi friends is working on the other half of my
Hmm.
family. And uh, and he
When did your people come? When did his people come here?
well, that's a little hard to tell, but it looks like his father was the immigrant, my great on the Cassidy side. Doesn't look like there was Cassidy before that. So I would say probably in the mid 1800s, something like that.
Wow,
Now, uh, on my mother's side of the family, Mary Virginia Quimby, who married my father, Bill Cassidy, William Robert Cassidy. Their family, it's a whole different story. I've got two thick volumes that was put together by the Quimbys. They had someone assemble their heritage. They landed here in like 1640.
get out of
Fought the
here.
Mohawk Indians, did all of that kind of stuff, and settled basically into the Ohio Valley. And they in the books that I have that are just sent up to my younger brother, who lives, Michael Cassidy, lives in north of San Francisco. Uh, uh, they in those volumes, the Quimbys go back to the Isle of Man, and they got it traced back in there to the 600s.
Jesus. That's
But they
amazing that you have that.
it is really amazing. It's fascinating to read through, and it's also fascinating that there's probably about 200 Charles Quimbys. I mean, my grandfather was Charles Quimby, my mother's brother was Charles. My cousin was Charles. Everybody's Charles.
Wow.
But in any case,
Wow.
and then on
Well, go back to your dad for a minute
you know,
because on
my
your dad's side, your dad's mother,
my
tell us
dad's
about your
mother
dad's
was
mother.
Rose Koletsky, and I have a gentleman who's working on that aspect of the family. She was the one of two daughters of a rabbi that that escaped the Russian pogrom of the early 1900s, and they came to America, uh, and the two daughters apparently fled that life and married, you know, us,
What
and
was that? Was that had to be
I mean, I have very little information about that. It's interesting, a lot of you have to understand. I'm sure you do that so many people escaping lives of where they're running for their lives.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter whether they're Jewish or whether they're in South America or wherever they're from, where their circumstances, because of either their heritage or their loyalties or their political beliefs or whatever. The idea was to be able to come to America, and from my understanding, most of them didn't mind changing their name because it was a way to start anew from
Right.
that kind of identification. In any case, uh, it seemed like that both Rose uh, Koletsky and her sister Ray uh, uh, married people out of the Jewish religion, and much to the distress of the rabbi father, I'm sure. and But in any case, um, that's so. I grew up with smoked whitefish on Sundays. What can I say?
And so your father is actually, according to my people, your
Yes.
father's Jewish because
Yeah.
his mother was Jewish. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
So but we were raised as Protestants, uh,
Hmm.
uh, um, but not uh, deeply. I wouldn't say. Um, and of course, you know, Washington D.C. is a fascinating area. That's 10 miles square in the middle of two southern states of Maryland and Virginia. But both Yorm and I grew up. Yorm is, you've known him, parents in the State Department. He traveled all over the world and got many cultural input from many different places.
Hmm.
Uh, but just being in Washington D.C. and in the part that I grew up in, Northwest Washington D.C., the exchange students were in the classes all through from grade school on up through through high school. And so it was I was much
There was
more open to a
diversity.
variety of people from different lands and communities, cultures,
Hmm.
and you made friendships, and of course, uh, you just learn subtly uh, that there's a bigger world out there than your little world, And it was fascinating because I, as a musician, would go into different kinds of communities playing in different styles of band. So I could play country music one time, maybe playing the country fairs in the summertime. I'd be maybe something with a more Appalachian orientation coming up through the Appalachian chain into Washington, D.C. Uh, uh, don't forget the Seegers. Mike Seeger, speaking of the Seegers, Mike Seeger, you know, uh, New Lost City Ramblers was oriented around that area and bringing up all the traditional folk music uh, uh, from the Appalachians. Uh, and the next night I'd be over at the Howard Theater listening to Ray Charles, Bobby Blue playing, and Jackie Wilson, the,
I know James Brown
and
was
James Brown.
huge for you. Yeah.
Well, it was in the sense that one of his purported to be one of his many drummers got me into an African American scene at age 16 playing the bass in Washington D.C., which was there was Northeast, which was that, and Northwest, of course, I grew up in. So there I was, found myself looking like you'd look as a 15-year-old me in Northeast Washington, playing after hours clubs with all African American musicians. After hours clubs were basically somebody's basement that sold beer
I was going to say, how did
after
they even let you
two
in
o'clock in the
after
evening.
hours?
And so, um, because I had a buddy, and so that's how you got in. And so I play a lot of gospel music. This is a 16, 15, 16-year-old. In sessions, speaking of Hammond organ, I played a lot of sessions where there'd be a sax, a Hammond organ, and me playing bass. If the Hammond organ player wasn't playing the pedals on the bass, or guitar, and I started out playing guitar. So
Okay, so wait, stop.
all of
So
that was going.
let's go back to that because people are asking me like, how'd you meet Yorma? But before you meet Yorma, before you're playing bass, you're playing guitar because you
Yeah.
found your
Well,
dad's
that's what
guitar, right?
that's why I was playing with Yorma when I had a band together. There was I was a gentleman,
But
Mike
you were playing
Meinenfeld.
lead, weren't you originally playing
Well, I
lead
was playing,
guitar?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was
He was
playing
playing
guitar.
rhythm, right?
Yeah, he's playing rhythm. Yeah, before he'd learned a finger picking style. So we're just doing cover songs and playing and
How
playing
did you
bass
meet
with
each
each other.
other?
We met through my older brother Charles Casady, Charles Warren Casady. May he rest in peace.
Mm.
And he was a year older than Yorma. So when Yorma's moving from 11th grade to 12th grade, Chick, his nickname is Chick, was in 12th grade. And he came over for record listening sessions. Now, we all collected records, and I have to step back a bit. I get into that some of the first music I listened to was through my father, was Eddie Kahn and Bix Beiderbecke and all these players of the 20s and 30s, because my father was an audiophile. He was a dentist. Now, going back to Rose Galetsky, in the late 20s, when he wanted to go into electronics, he loved electronics, he loved building, working with that. His mom said, electronics, it's a fly-by-night business.
There's
You'll
no
never make it.
future in
You
that.
become a doctor, dentist, or a lawyer. So he became a dentist. His brother, Warren Casady, became a doctor. They lived 6 blocks from each other on Reno Road. And on my mother's side of the were civil engineers. My grandfather was a civil engineer, and her brother was a lawyer. And on that, then when my grandfather was, when my mom's brother, Charles, was going to college and becoming a lawyer, his father decided, my grandfather decided, he would get a law degree too, and they were the first father and son team to get a law degree together at Georgetown University. Anyway, so they, my father was an audiophile and he loved it. So that's why there was that banjo, 4-string banjo, strummer type. There was a Washburn guitar, and funny enough, there's a pair of speed skates over there. But that's another story. So, so he was an audiophile. And he belonged to the American Jazz Society, and we would get records every month. Jazz compilations would come, and he would play them on his Garrard changer with his Heathkit built by himself hi-fi amplifier and high fidelity was coming in, and he built all this equipment for his office, which was attached to the house. There he played classical music on FM radio, which was a new format because soon after that, then there was FM stereo, but it was mostly used for classical, and there'd be calm classical music playing in the office, and downstairs in the rec room that Dad built because learning those skills from his father. He could do carpentry, he could do electrics around the house, he could do plumbing, he fixed everything himself. He did all
Wow.
this. It was all hands-on stuff. And so at a very early age, 10, 11, 12, I started listening to a lot of music through this means, and then starting to collect records myself. And where I got my own at age 11 or something, I got my own web chord changer, and uh, uh, and had my own little setup. You know, Dad's setup, of course, was under lock and key. You know, and the kids had their own setup. And later on, all that fell away. But and the rec room that was just had a coal burning furnace, and then later on an oil burning furnace. And this is something that you West Coasters don't know about. We have basements out there on the East Coast,
Yes,
and
I'm an East
and
Coaster.
you know, good damp, dank basements. You know, and the coal chute would come down, the coal would, you know, and be filthy. He took all of this and took a big section. And in the 50s, the craze of the recreation room, the knotted pine walls, and with the Nolga, you know, hide seats, you know, and backlit pictures, and a bar, of course, uh, and the hi-fi section where we played music, you know. And so Yorma would come to visit Chick, and we would all go down and listen to music and put records on, and we all collected music. Uh, and my older brother Chick collected blues, you know, all the Chicago blues music that was originally, I still have upstairs. This came out on 78s, and then we go to 45s. Uh, and we got most of our records, our listening, uh, buying, was a place in Northeast Washington called Waxy Maxie's Quality Music Store. And Maxie was that, you know, and you know, slick black hair, and probably of Jewish descent, I'm sure. And Max, hey, so but we go through the record bins, you know, by you know, Mickey and Sylvia, Love is Strange, things,
Mm.
the Muddy Waters, Little Walter was all on 45s. You go through and pick these out and bring them back home and play them. You know? And then later on, those collections were compiled on LPs, which I still have upstairs in my library, that I
Wow,
bought
that's so
all
great.
at age, you know, all that early age. But I have to thank my father for broadening my listening palette with music that came before. Now, at that time, he was listening to a lot of big band stuff with a little more polished sound. But when he was 20 years earlier, when he was in college, in the late 20s, he was listening to Eddie Kahn and Big Spiderbeck, and all the New Orleans guys, Jelly Roll Morton, you know, that I grew up in listening to all this stuff. And I kind of drifted towards, I used to say, you know, I don't like the polished stuff, you know, the big band stuff so much, you know, Ray Conniff or any of that. I kind of like the more nitty gritty, small combo where you could hear everybody interact and play off of each other, you know. Later on, I got a real appreciation for what went into proper arranging for the big band stuff, you know. But that has always probably been my hugest influence in the way I approach music, is that inner combo stuff. The Jimmy Droofy Three, you know, Jimmy Droofy on clarinet. Uh, uh, it was just a trio, you know, and I loved that interplay stuff. And all the early, later on, the more radical Eric Dolphy stuff, where there'd just be a couple of musicians working in their way through the music. And to this day, that's what I chase when Yorm and I just play as a duo. You know, I'm looking for that, you know, that that thing that we can make together with just a few musicians. And the
Mm.
more you have, the more you have to arrange out and parcel out parts and things like that. But in any case, that was the big heavy influence for me in my approach. Uh, uh, Bob Hall on the guitar, uh, uh, Johnny Smith on the guitar, uh, uh, you know, Moonlight Vermont with Stan Getz. There's kind of really pretty, Paul Desmond on alto. Those were, I really liked the melodic, the players that really uh, kind of drew you into with the tone of their instrument, you know. Um, and that doesn't mean it's just got to be sweet, because you listen to Eric Dolphy on bass clarinet, it just knocks your socks off. So people have asked me what are my bass influences, and really I didn't have a lot of bass influences. I started on guitar. It was musical influences that I had. That when I started to play bass, there was hardly anybody else playing electric bass, you know, which is where James Brown comes into the picture. His and the country western guys came into the picture because it was an instrument of convenience to play out on the road without carrying a stand-up bass.
Right.
But you know, you listen to Bobby Blue Bland or Ray Charles or any of that, it's always a stand-up double bass.
Right.
You know, so the early stuff with uh, James Brown was you hear the bass player playing electric bass, but he's playing walking bass lines as if he was playing a stand-up bass player. The syncopated stuff didn't come in until a few years later, when people started approaching it like a bass guitar, where you could do those things on it rather than trying to mimic a stand-up bass with walking bass lines. But you know, it's 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 interesting. I reflect back on this so much that how much I got from my father, who was, you know, from the school of the 50s. You know, fathers and sons didn't really chat a lot. You know? We didn't sit down and have, you know, but he was always encouraging and you know, I mean, don't forget,
Okay, so that
both
was
you
my
and I,
next
we weren't
question.
supposed to be musicians. We were supposed to get a real job, go to
Okay,
college, and
that's what I
do
wanted
something
to.
for real. You know.
Did he appreciate what
Oh,
you did? Did he live
absolutely.
to see you have great success?
Yes, he did.
Good.
He saw that, and he was happy that. So I've taken about 500 micrograms of acid one night over on Divisadero Street there at a flat where Yora and I, this is around 1967. See, my dad passed away the next year at 68. And, uh, and I think it's a great idea about 6 in the morning to call Dad and tell him how much I love him, man.
Oh
You know,
my God.
and my dad gets there's 3 hours difference, and we've been up all night, of course, and you know I'm calling him 6, 7, 8, 9, or maybe it's 5 in the morning for me. It's 8:30. He's about to walk into the office next door
Oh
and be
my
a
God.
dentist,
Oh my
and
God.
I'm yeah, hi, how you doing, Dad? It's really great to hear your voice. And so I don't know what he ever made of that, you know. But funny enough, up on this wall, I don't think you can. Yes, maybe you can see it. See, let's see. See
What are
that
you
picture
pointing?
right there?
Wait, what are you pointing to?
Yeah, I'm pointing to. Here, I could do it this way. So this is really cool. Here, hold on.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. You just took a picture with your phone.
So, in answer to your question, he's you know you know the Jefferson Airplane just started touring and we're going back and forth and he never came to a show. Uh, uh, and he passed away in 1968. As a matter of fact, I was told he passed away just before I hit the stage in some place we were playing by one of my
Oh,
road guys. In any case, he had heart issues. He had a quadruple bypass. And of course, we can get into this later on, but there was an alcohol issue as well. And as we talked about before. So
hmm.
anyway, but but when I talked to Mom later on, who lived, you know, until 1996 is when she passed away, and she said he was really proud of me, but he was so conflicted, I think, with doing a profession. He was the best at it. I mean, he was a fantastic dentist. He did all his work, and I learned from him how to lost wax centrifugal cast gold and all kinds. He did all his own gold work and
Wow.
teeth fillings and all that stuff. He was a perfectionist, like everything. He spoke German, you know, of course, being his background, you know, Mom spoke German, of course, and all the medical, uh, went to Georgetown University, graduated there. All the medical field was a lot of German back in those days. You had to read German, all the medical
Wow.
books were in German, all that kind of stuff. So he had multi, abilities and talent, uh, but he never followed his dream. And his dream was to go into electronics. And of course, he fixed the TVs and he did all this stuff, everything himself. And I think he was haunted by that. Uh,
Mm.
and it led to you know I think some unhappy uh, aspects and some you know alcoholism. He was definitely an alcoholic, and that eventually led to his death through many ways that it can through physically destroying
Mhm.
part of your body. In any case, he had heart issues too. But in any case, but I do have, when my mom passed away, my late wife, Dinah Balfoy, may she rest in peace, who passed away in 2012, we went back to pack up mom's things, and mom made me executor to distribute it out to my older brother, Charles, and my younger brother, Michael, and go back to the house and pack things up. So what we found was in one of the drawers was uh, this. Uh, let's see. Where's it? The Life magazine cover that we were on as Jefferson Airplane.
Oh, it's hard to make out, but
Yeah, I mean we're
yeah.
we're on. Oh, here we go. This will work better.
Oh, yeah, there it
Okay.
is.
All right.
Oh, there it is. Oh,
All right.
yeah, there it is.
Now you see in that corner,
Yes.
in the corner there's a little sticker on the other side. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, they're right there. I got it.
All
Yeah.
right.
I can't see what it is, but I can
Okay.
see
Now
there's
I'll
a
show you what
sticker.
the sticker is. It's really cool. So Diana found this in the drawer, and then here it is. Oh shit.
Wait.
All right. Okay, you can't see it because of
I
what's it.
Yeah, it keeps rotating.
It flips around. Maybe you can see it this way. Anyway, it says Dr. William R. Casady, DDS. It was delivered and was in the waiting room at his office. When the people
Oh,
would come
oh,
in.
oh.
And so I found it. So we put it together and opened it up, and framed it up on the wall there. And he had passed away. Had died just before that came out, so he
Oh,
never got to see that. And I thought he did that, but when I
oh,
looked at the dates, then I realized that it was just a month or something before he passed away. Yeah,
oh,
yeah. But I mean, that would
oh.
have been pretty cool for him to see. There's a waiting room. There's his son there, and of course, and he never mentioned too much about the long hair and marijuana and all that kind of stuff. I never got like getting back to my parents. They
How about your mom, Jack? How did
well, the thing is, the way I started playing guitar was I went up into the attic, and the attic was the attic, but on the third floor, that's where the live-in domestic help lived. Later on, it became my older brother's room up there because it was the furthest away from anybody else, and you know, and in there was this Washburn guitar, and I started playing around with it when I was around 11 or something, and I had a couple of missing strings. As I remembered, it had four strings, and it was a Washburn nylon string guitar, small parlor guitar. I wish I had the guitar today. In any
Hmm.
case, it disappeared, uh, and I didn't think too much of it. And then at Christmas time, uh,
Speaking of which, we
kids
can't
come down.
forget, you have to tell us the story about your bass that disappeared that you got back all
Yeah,
those
yeah, I
years
will.
later.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
okay.
So at Christmas time, I'm running. The kids are going down to the tree and all of that, and there's presents and stuff. I'm looking around, and I'm a little woe is me because there's not a lot of stuff with my name on it, but there is a an envelope on the tree, and I take the tree. It says Jack. It says, "Dear Jack, this entitles you to 12 guitar lessons at so and so school up the street, and we wanted to get your guitars strung with steel strings, but it wasn't done in time, but it'll be done soon." So my parents were progressive enough and wise enough to know uh, that I was interested in. Of course, a kid, your 11-year-old, thinks you can sneak off the attic and nobody knows where you are. Know what you're doing. But of course, that's not quite the way it works. Not supposed to anyway. And they, right before I learned any bad habits at all, they sent me off to a guitar teacher, and I learned good habits.
Such as, you're going to pick up a bass now. And I just want to say, while you're talking about parents and kids, that you share a birthday with my son, which makes you very extra
Oh,
special to me.
excellent. And basically, this guitarist that I had, Harry Voorhees, was my first
And my
guitarist.
son's name is Harry.
And Harry Voorhees worked with big bands, and he played. I learned from the Gibson guitar book that was returned to me because I lent it to a friend when I came out to California, and it was returned back about 10 years ago, in a 3-ring book, with and
Binder,
you
yeah.
learn "Peg of My Heart" and songs like that, and a proper plucking in it. But anyway, he taught me proper hand precision. One finger for each string. I'm playing it on a bass now, but anyway, that guitar technique, he taught me proper hand positions that to this day I thank him,
Wow.
because when the truth is found to be lies, but on don't you? So, speaking of that, a lot of
Oh,
those, a lot of those lines and the way I approach a lot of the music when I joined the Jefferson Airplane in 1965 after it was just formed, a couple months before.
Thank you for
A
playing
lot
that,
of
by the
that,
way. Somebody had just brought up that specific
yeah,
bass
you
line.
know, a lot of my influences were jazz influences and walking bass lines and connecting the music together with walking bass lines. And although we might put a harder beat behind it, in that song, say Somebody Love, that was the how I approached it. Even though we'd be going, with a more backbeat, rock and roll backbeat. But anyway, a lot of that stuff that I would be doing with the airplane that I was able to do and had the freedom to do, uh, uh, and with whoever's writing the songs, whether it's Grace's songs or Paul's songs or Yorma's songs or Marty's songs, I had that open palette to approach and use and some of my influences of a variety of kinds of approaches to any given song form. So I wasn't forced into having to do a certain kind of a backbeat with the drum lick oriented, repetitive lick oriented basis for other people to lay music on top of. And that's
Right.
what was really the unique thing. The music had become by 1965. I went back went into college and was trying to keep, like everybody. If you weren't in college and you were over 18, you were in the army. That's just the way it was. These kids don't know about draft cards today, and
Did you
so
have a number? Were you in that time
oh yeah,
period?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What
I
was
got
your
drafted.
number?
I got drafted.
Oh,
So in any case, the everybody did. You did, so if you were in college, you got a deferment, of course. As long as you kept a C average.
mhm.
But in any case, uh, the music scene in Washington D.C., which was wonderful in certain ways. There was 100 different clubs of different styles. With, I go down to the Pine Tavern here, Mac Wiseman or something, and I'd be over in Northeast, and there was all the rhythm and blues clubs and the jazz clubs. Uh, Folk clubs at the early 60s with Coffee and Confusion, with all of that era that I was talking to you about. But generally, there wasn't any encouragement for band and musicians to get together and singer-songwriters to write their own music. It was you played other people's music all the
When
time.
you were playing covers, Jack, what covers were you playing?
Uh, a lot of
Wait, before you don't put that down yet.
a
I
lot
have
of
one,
okay,
I
a
have a
lot of
request because
okay.
if you don't play White Rabbit changed my life. You, ay, ay, ay.
So that came from
Oh,
Ravel's Bolero because I am and still
wow.
am a big classical music fan. So that's how that came about. But
Wow. Yeah.
um, where were we?
All right, I'm sorry I interrupted that. You were saying that we were
Oh,
talking about
the club
covers.
scene, the club
Yeah.
scene. So the kind of covers we played when I was in a rhythm and blues band,
Hmm.
all the bands, it wasn't heavy in the guitar world like it is today. That was yet to come. So most of your solos and most of your linear solos were played by horns, sax or trumpet, something like that. So I was in bands where we played a lot of Bobby Blue Bland. We played Ray Charles. We played things that where there's usually a baritone sax, a tenor sax, or double an alto, and maybe a horn. We played a lot of adult clubs that was
Oh.
like a lot of Louis Prima and Keely Smith, that kind of music. I was
Hmm.
wearing plaid tuxedos every night and all of that, and Well, it was really interesting because as a 16-year-old in high school, I would be playing these clubs sometimes 4 nights a week, coming home at 3 or 4 in the morning, dragging up to school with a couple hours of sleep, and then sleeping through homeroom, if you remember homeroom.
Hell
And
yeah.
uh, and I, the last year of high school, when I was working pretty rapidly, my grades were, of course, shooting down the tubes. And as a matter of fact, I think I had to finish English that I failed in summer school. Uh, but I was just getting a few hours sleep. I was working maybe 4 nights a week in clubs, you know.
And your
And,
parents were letting you do
well,
this.
getting, there was there was unrest in the household. Let me put it that way, with
Hmm.
my father's issues and whatnot, and I think I just managed to find a route out of all of that, and my parents were okay with it. I mean, they had. I think the dynamic they were working on their dynamic so much that they were. I think that they were glad that I had a passion. You know, just wasn't those days. You just didn't talk about stuff. We didn't
Yeah.
have family meetings.
Hmm.
I was out working. I mean, this all started out when I got uh, my first guitar, built my first amplifier with my dad on the dining room table at night. My first Heathkit amplifier.
So you
Uh,
had the same
and
talent for electronics that your dad had?
yeah,
Hmm.
somewhat. He really had it. Um, but I bought my first Fender Telecaster guitar in 1958. God, I wish I had that today. And $115 with my lawn cutting business and my newspaper route business. I delivered since I was 11 years old. I delivered the Washington Post, and then we had the Evening Star, which is an afternoon paper. On Sunday, it was 450 papers I delivered. And then I had the lawn cutting business, and that's how I bought my stuff. And so I guess I always was a little industrious that way of wanting to be, you know, get out. I mean, kids today, they never seem to want to leave home. Norm and I were talking about it. We had our plan at age 16 for sure to get the heck out of the
Oh
house.
yeah.
And and at 18, I graduated from high school that summer that I said I had to go to summer school to graduate. I had my own apartment then. It was $50 a week. $50 a month was the rent. It was a brick 3 walk-up story place a 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a living room. It was just fine, and I was on my own. I had my own car, all that kind of stuff. Uh, so
Tell us,
in
Jack,
working
how
in the
you
clubs, I
transition.
was making money. And so that last year of high school, I was earning and making money, and I guess my mom was okay with it. And
And you'd already transitioned to the bass. Tell us how you
yeah,
transitioned from guitar to the
was
bass.
that was age 16, uh,
And what,
1960.
why did you go from being a lead guitar player to a bass player?
Well, it wasn't just a lead guitar. You were a guitarist, and a
Yeah.
guitarist had to play lead, so it wasn't just that. But I went. There was a friend of mine in the same town named Danny Gatton, a very now famous guitarist. He's a wonder kid at 16.
Mhm.
He won violin contest, fiddle contest, banjo contest, things like that. He was a great guitar player, and he just had it. And if you know anything about him, you should look him up.
Mhm.
Anybody should look up Danny Gatton. Well, he was a year younger than me, but in any case, in the summertime, when I turned 16, we worked and traded around and played a lot of different bands. And there was a couple of people I have to mention in that band that Yorm and I had. Uh, Warren Smith was the first drummer, and Ronnie McDonald was the second drummer. And Ronnie and I played in a bunch of different bands together in Washington D.C. area. After Yorma then graduated and went off to high school. Now I'm 16 years old, not 15. And Danny had a gig that was offered him for the summertime for a few weeks in one of the clubs, and I can't remember what it was. It was the Dixie Pig or something. Club where Charlie Daniels used to play at as a 15-year-old
Hmm.
in Virginia. In any case, it was a gig that paid $115 a week. Now, of course, these are like 5 sets a night, 6 nights a week.
Wow.
Shows on Sunday afternoon. 40 on, 20 off, 40 on, 20 off. In any case, his bass player, Ernie, and I forgot his last name right now, in any case, got very ill. Uh, a serious illness that put him in the hospital. And so Danny called up to say if I knew any bass players, and there are very few electric bass players around there.
Hmm.
And I said no, I didn't. He says listen, and so we looked around. And he called back and he said, listen, why don't you do the gig? Because we're buddies. I said, listen, I've never played bass, and of course the old joke comes out. How hard can it be? It's only got 4 strings. So, in any case, I used Ernie's bass. He very graciously lent it to me, and it was a Fender Precision bass, kind of like the one you see James Jamerson play. It was sculpted back. It had only been out a couple of years. The original Fender bass kind of looked like a big Telly bass, a big Telly guitar. It
Hmm.
was, and then they came out with the Sunburst sculpted back Fender bass that we all know and love now. And so I did the gig for the summer, and I just fell in love with the instrument. But the instrument, it was tough to play for the size of my hands and whatnot. So it was a big neck for me. And Fender had just come out that summer, with the jazz bass, the Fender jazz bass. They had 2 pickups on it and concentric pots, and I like the idea of that because I could blend the tones a little more. I tried one out in uh, Chuck Levine's music store in Washington D.C. and bought that, and which was a big ticket item. I think it was 220 bucks or something like that, which is a lot of bucks in 1960 when gas was 19 cents a gallon or something. And uh, and I just love the tonal range, and a little background of that. When I go down to Constitution Hall and listen to great orchestras in the Washington D.C. area uh, as a young teenager, I just love certain orchestrated approaches. I love Prokofiev and loved a lot of the ballet music. So in the early '60s, that same year, Jackie Kennedy had helped put together the cultural exchange program with Russia, and we were sending over Van Cliburn, and they were sending over von Vyacheslav Richter here, and there was the ballet companies. The Kirov Ballet was coming over, Boschwa and the Kirov Folk Ballet, and I go to all these concerts, and I'd listen to the bass, double bass section, maybe be 8 up in there, move into the cello section, move. I just love that range, and that was the range that I was sitting in looking at with the bass guitar. So I loved working up high on the instrument. Then and just knocked me out. So I started playing bass, and of course my work exponentially shot through the roof because there weren't very many electric bass players,
Hmm.
and I found myself just doing a lot of varieties of kinds of music. Like I say, this gentleman who had played drums with James Brown had gotten me that I met on a gig had got me into the gospel world in the Northeast Washington, where I play these uh, these church music shows, where there'd just be maybe a Hammond organ and a bass and a sax or a guitar or whatever, little combo stuff. But he also got me this a number of other gigs where I'd find myself playing with the caliber of musicians that I normally uh, Dennis Sun, White Dennis Sun, if a 16-year-old wouldn't normally find himself. But um, also, it just brought me into a lot of different worlds, into the jazz world and listening. I never really wanted to play jazz or play in the style of jazz, but I loved the movement around the instruments and the influences and listening to so many players. Uh, and I had all the West Coast guys too, that were playing jazz in the late '50s. Gary Mulligan and all that cool sound jazz that was going out on the West Coast versus the more aggressive stuff coming out of the East Coast. But also, I love the ragtime music that worked into the world of Yorma when he was listening to Reverend Gary Davis. So I loved it all. I just soaked it up.
Mm.
When I think back how much I just soaked in music from all genres, um, and how that sort of worked into my world when I finally got the chance at age 21, when I was getting so depressed about having to play other people's music and not wondering where I was going to go next. The opportunity when Yorma invited me out to San Francisco to join Jefferson Airplane, all of a sudden I found myself in the complete opposite of a strict format band setup like I had in Washington, into this crazy world of San Francisco where people were forming bands, mostly coming out of the folk era. A lot of the folk musicians and all the guys, Grateful Dead and a lot of the others, came out of that folk world. They were starting to plug into amplifiers, uh, without any preconceptions, not trying to sound like something or being forced into sounding like a certain genre. Uh, uh, and for better or worse, these people from different backgrounds, like in the Jefferson Airplane, Marty is a singer, worked in ensemble groups in the folk world, but also in the early '60s he was groomed as a solo artist, produced in Los Angeles here. And they'd come out with a couple of songs. And Yorma, of course, came from the purest world of Reverend Gary Davis and working with finger picking, but that gave him the opportunity to start writing all his material. And Paul Kantner coming out, say, heavily influenced by, say, the Weavers and vocal harmonies. That's why the Jefferson Airplane had that three-part vocal
Mm.
harmony sound, with Signe totally being part of that unique sound, with Marty, Signe, and Paul doing that
Mm.
three-part harmony. Later on, Grace stepped in a year later, and then she added her element, which was a really gave me a really interesting opportunity, because the songs that I would play with Yorm and the songs I would play with Marty and Paul, Grace brought her classical background into it on the piano. And if you notice in her songs like Lawman and just a whole variety of songs, her chordal approach was always different, and that really afforded me interesting opportunities on the bass to play. And not one of these people ever told me to play a certain bass line. I mean, that was the
Fantastic.
beauty of it. So from all this variety of background, originally Skip Spence was our drummer. He moved, but he was a guitarist, and he moved on to form his music with Bobby Grape. Spencer Dryden came in with his jazz background and doing a lot of sessions in Los Angeles. And that's why the sound of the Jefferson Airplane never had that bass and foot drum pattern playing like other bands had.
Mm-mm.
Uh, so, uh, so with that sound, we developed our own sound. Yorma really learned how to play electric guitar in that band, because he wasn't playing electric lead line, single line guitar, worked with amplifiers and whatnot back in our little high school band. So, but that also allowed Yorma to work with finger picking and the concept of a bass line and partial chords with his fingers, and moving chord patterns to develop marry both those genres together in the group.
what a group it was. I mean, not long, but
Well, it was intense. I mean, when you think
wow.
about it, that period in San Francisco, what I would call those years that were special, 1965 to 72, just happened to be the life of Jefferson Airplane. But that was just every day was every day. Yorm and I never went anywhere in that city or went on the road without a guitar in our hands and bass in
Mm.
hand. We played everywhere. After we play our shows, we in Chicago we go to Mother Blues, and play all the clubs and meet all the great musicians and get a chance to jam and play with them. It was a very intense, you know, uh, very little sleep during that 7 years.
Well, speaking of which, I'm so sorry for your loss for Phil Lesh and uh, uh, yes, you played with everybody, including Jimi Hendrix. How did that come to be that that voodoo child? How did that happen?
Well, Bill Graham was our manager, and that gave us that conduit into the Filmore auditorium. We practiced in a synagogue next door. They used that as a practice hall, right next door to the Filmore. Uh, 1967, he took over and managed us for about a year, but we had that close proximity to the Fillmore. Then it wasn't called the Fillmore; it was just the Fillmore. And as he would search for different action combinations, he was the genius of putting different kinds of music together with poetry all on the same stage. I mean, we have the
Right?
craziest lineups of music on the same show. And when Jimmy came to with the Jimi Hendrix Experience with Dole Redding and Mitch Mitchell. I played Monterey, of course, and we were playing that, and playing the Fillmore. Then we'd be there. We'd be playing next door, rehearsing next door, and get a chance. He'd come over and we'd our rehearsal, and we'd play together. Uh, and I became really good friends with Mitch Mitchell. I loved his drumming, and of course,
Mm.
his jazz background and the drumming was different. In my opinion, that's what made the Jimi Hendrix sound so special. Is
Mm.
Mitch's his drumming in it because it isn't really heavy-handed, kill on the drums. It's got a lot of uh, fluidity to it
Mhm.
and movement. I think that's what made that the magic in that sound that he had. So anyway, uh, we weren't all working all the time then. There's a lot of time on the end. So that was the wonderful thing about San Francisco when the bands weren't on stage; they were in the audience. And
Wow.
everybody left you alone. There wasn't any issue. It was a small town. The people saw you as people. You'd be on stage and all of that, but then you'd be in the audience and you'd be listening to somebody else. That was the beautiful thing about that period of time when
Mm.
the audiences wanted to hear how you progressed as a musician, as a band. They weren't interested in you playing like the record. And I remember Phil was talking about this in some article he wrote, and all that. They weren't interested as a band at playing the record. The record's a means to get it out there somehow. You know, uh, but that's where FM radio came into being. Going back to my father building those radios
Mhm.
and using his office that was all devoted to classical music and would shut down at nighttime. And
Mm.
then they started having uh, the FM stations would over after the formats got too restrictive on AM, they turned it over to FM where you went back to DJs being able to program their own shows. And then all of a sudden you had that 15-minute cut that I did with Jimi Hendrix, Voodoo Child, played on radio.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you'd never get it played on radio. For those
Right.
people that happen to be staying up all night long, good Lord knows how did they do that? And uh, and you had albums being made with the thought in mind that you could play music that wouldn't fit into a 2.5 minute format for AM radio. And naturally, you all wanted to hear your stuff on the radio, but then that opened up that whole world. That audience would listen to the music when they didn't have the bands, and when the bands would come to town, they'd come in to hear the band. But they were a listening audience, dancing audience, and they wanted to hear how you've changed stuff. They weren't interested in making hearing. You mix up the tempo a little bit. You add a section here or there. You moved it around a little bit, and they wanted to hear how you improved as musicians. That was what was really unique about the whole scene, with every band, with the Quicksilver Messenger Service. I got, uh, you know, uh, the Charlatans. I'm looking at a picture up here. So, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and that was slowly that became taken a little more seriously as the record companies come up from LA, and we got signed, in 1966 and made our first album. And then later on, all the other bands got signed. And then a few years later, instead of us taking a $12 PSA flight to come down here and record in Los Angeles at Sunset and Ivor, I just drove by yesterday, to the RCA building and record there for the first 3 albums. And Wally Heider built a studio in San Francisco, and the band started to record up there. Later on, out in Sausalito, the record plant and all that.
Tell me about Bliss's Pointed Little Head. Oh my goodness, you are the
Well, that's a
star.
live. Yeah, I mean that's a live album. So,
Mhm.
and we, it's a good example, and we're pretty much in our furious period with the Jefferson Airplane. Uh, it's not quite laid back, shall we say. There was some enhancement going on. Uh, uh,
We'll talk about the
and
enhancants in a minute.
you know, I think us and the Oakland Raiders were taking that enhancement, a little foam coming out of the corners of our eyes, but the but um, I think it was a good example of that period when of Jefferson Airplane pretty much at their best, and
Mhm.
and it was just a great period great and interesting period of time to be playing. It was, we were really, um, like I say, just playing constantly and all the time.
What was Woodstock like for you? What's your recollection? Do you have much recollection of it? Were you
Well,
totally
actually,
blissed
oh,
out?
absolutely. I mean, after all, we were waiting to play most of the time. I mean, waiting to get into the venue. There was all the logistics issue.
Wait, I'm trying to remember what you were. Were you helicoptered in?
No, Yorm and I came in a uh,
Oh yeah, he said you
Ford
drove.
station wagon. Yeah.
I don't know how you got in through those cars,
Well,
but
that's with we got in with a little less car than we started.
wait, what? What happened?
That we started that the LTD had had chrome siding, and when we got into the venue, it didn't have chrome siding, and neither did a lot of the cars along the way.
Wow.
And that was the mode of transportation of choice. That was before vans. You had the LTD wagon, and sometimes they had the faux wood on the side of the
Uh-huh.
wagon, circa 1960, 68 there, and that was pretty much how you traveled. No tour buses then, not for us. Country guys using the Eagles, but we weren't.
So how much of so what was Woodstock like for you? What was that experience like
Well,
for you?
the logistic issue and just watching it unfold, it was a fascinating part. We were in Holiday Inn around, outside, and watching it on, you know, don't forget the TV was on a rocking stand with an aerial behind it and had 3 channels, and watching the news like everybody else, because I think we were supposed to be in the second day or something. I think we were supposed to go on Saturday night and we ended up Sunday morning,
Mhm.
and the rain delays and all kinds of delays, and people still working on the stage when the concert was beginning, So, and something just you're watching this thing go completely beyond your imagination, and uh, then getting up on stage and looking out and seeing that mass of audience. And I think the biggest shock was to see, in these little conclaves of units around different cities and whatnot, as these sort of a different form of young people coming together uh, and around the music and around what was happening in the so-called the scene. Uh, all of a sudden, you said to yourself, "Wow, there's." We didn't say the number then, but that there's all these people that are us out there. There's 300,000 of us out there, and that's when it really hits you. I mean, we had the BN and San Francisco and outdoor shows and concerts, with that attracted a lot of people, but everything was on a very primitive scale.
Right.
And the big PA systems hadn't been built. It was part of what the Grateful Dead and all the people involved with him, Owsley and all those guys and all the Ron Wickersham and Susan Wickersham and Rick Turner making guitars, my early guitars, and people in the electronics world that had dropped out of more formal jobs, that were coming into that world with their skills and building our own, cabinets and using Macintosh power amplifiers and started to build their own preamps and all that kind of stuff, and amplifiers to run these, because as the people increased, the size of the people, there wasn't an infrastructure in the PA world. The PA world was just that, a public address system. It wasn't about getting good tone in the
Mm.
music world and trying to get good tone, the way it sounded close to the stage, have that sound that good away from the stage. So all that was developing all during those years, which was just fantastic. So at Woodstock, you know, uh, the it was all being done and built as you saw it. It was new. That was all different. How do you get the sound out to 300,000 people? And build it. So all that world was building up and developing at the same time. You know, the same way in Myers and all those guys that worked in that world. Trying to get the music out to the people with the best fidelity as possible.
Did you get to stay at all after you played, or did they cart you out of
We
there
had
right away?
we left after, well, we played in the morning. We
Right,
didn't
I know.
start
Good morning,
yeah, and
people.
we left.
I'll
Yeah,
never forget it.
yeah, and then I think we left after that
Mhm.
because we came down and did a. I'm not sure whether there's the secretary. I did the Dick Cavett show or something like that after.
Mm.
It's not one of those things, and because we were on tour, we had other
Yeah.
gigs to go to.
Wow. So let's talk about what those days were like for you. I mean, I know what I was smoking a lot of pot. I was doing some acid, but we were so drugs and alcohol a part of you were talking a little bit about your father's
Yeah.
addiction issues. How about for you, Jack? What
Oh,
was it like
absolutely.
back
I
then?
mean, that was the lifestyle, and uh, 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 the acid part of it, what it did wasn't a huge part. I mean, it was part of it, but we certainly learned that you could stand on stage and play on acid, not for acid. The joke was my my guitar neck would turn into a tree log with vines or something, or whatever, you know. Uh, so. Uh, but it definitely was used to enhance and listen to music and hear things that perhaps you hadn't heard before, and expand your in a certain sense your concentration levels, in another sense not. But and of course the drugs and alcohol, and then cocaine and for some heroin. That wasn't one of my deals, but that later on with the various uh, and alcohol, and good old alcohol, which of course was always present. And so So that saw, you know, many many a person leave the earth too early because of all that, you know. And of course, you soon find out that you can't get anything done if you're, yeah, you pass that point of where's the advantage to and what's the disadvantage. And hopefully, you come along in your life and you you make the realization and the drug or alcohol doesn't overtake you, but it does.
Did you have a bottom, Jack, or did you just decide
Oh,
you'd had
absolutely.
enough?
That was much later on. Uh, I got clean and sober in 1990, February 25th. And there had been a number of incidents and a couple of DUIs along the way. And luckily, I didn't kill anybody behind a wheel of a car while driving drunk. But that was the. I tried a number of times in the 80s to stop,
Mhm.
and I'd I'd stopped at different points in my life. Uh, Cocaine to start up and to get more intense into the alcohol, and in the 80s got back into cocaine, and then I stopped the cocaine and back into the alcohol. Uh, you know, I was heavy into pot in the 60s, 70s, but much almost non-existent after say 1972. But various periods of time in your life come in the early 70s. Yorm and I are watching the Olympics and saw Art Shank speed skate in Sapporo come through the fog like this and look like the Phantom, and his wife, may she rest in peace, Margareta, being Swedish, had skated all her life as a kid. We said let's go try skating. So we went down to Legs ice rink in San Francisco and met a couple of people that was skating and bought some speed skates, and that led to going out. Um, I think I spent 7 years in the winters out in Norway and Germany, uh, staying 2 months at a time out there, skating in the summer and not doing anything, no drugs, no nothing, and that got me into learning how to lift weights, ride a bicycle, as support sports and conditioning in order to speed skate, and of course I was just a novice. I mean, I don't think I ever, you know, did a 500 more under, you know, 54 seconds or something, which is absurdly slow. But I met people in that world, and for me, coming out of all those drugs and alcohol, the serious period of the 60s, it was terrific because I found that I loved finding a discipline that was completely different than the guitar.
Mm.
Because as a youngster, I had at age 3.5 and 7, I had a serious heart disease, rheumatic fever,
Oh,
and
wow.
through my parents, because they said when I was 7 or something, I was like 1/3 underweight or something like that. Uh, my father being in the medical world, his father got me into a program, uh, a test program, a blind test program to address rheumatic fever with penicillin, which was just had come out of the battlefield use at late in the Second War, late, and then into the Korean War when I was 1953. So they started to address that for heart issue and heart disease, and I was put into a trial program with, I think, 80 kids. 40 of us got penicillin and 40 of us didn't. My father made sure I got the penicillin, and I was
Mm.
on my back for, I think, 4 months, not allowed to move or anything. At the What was the name of that place? The Christ Child Farm Children's Hospital, something like that, out in Maryland. And it was a real blind study. 40 of us got it, 40 didn't. 40 kids died, 40 didn't. And I was one of the ones that
Whoa.
did. And so So they
Wow.
discovered that that this would treat heart disease, and I was lucky. So I luckily I didn't have permanent damage. I mean, I still have some issues. I have heart valve prolapse a bit, and but here I am, 80 years old, and I'm here today thanks to my dad getting me in on this program. And
Wow.
so, as a word to people out there who don't trust anything about anything, uh, I've always not been afraid of the medical world and doctors and trying to figure out what I can do if I have an issue. And to bring that into my dear, sweet late wife, Diana. So, she was diagnosed with adenoid cystic carcinoma in 1990. Dinah was from England, Balfour. Yes, that Balfour.
Mm.
Um, and so when we visited Israel in 2011, we got the royal treatment. You're that Balfour. So anyway, so we experimented. She had a very rare cancer of the trachea. Had to have a tracheal resection, but she approached it, and just then the internet was just kind of starting to be a focal point of information, and which was really opened up originally for doctors anyway
There's
to
balloons
see
coming
things.
up. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not mine.
No,
In any case,
Zoom is crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. So in any case, um, we did a lot of searching because there was no protocol for it here in the cancer protocol. And
Hmm.
she went through a lot of issues, and it metastasized to her lungs with a lot of nodules in your lungs. And eventually, as they say, it's not the cancer that you die from; it's the organs that shut down after that. In any case, they gave her 5 years, and she made it to 13 years.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
the principal caregiver here in that world. And we chased all over the world. We went to Germany many times, chasing down treatments and protocols, and
Mm.
mixing and matching different kinds of chemos that they wouldn't allow you here because there was no protocol in the FDA for adenoid cystic carcinoma. So doctors weren't allowed to do things. Now they can a little more, but then they could. And so
Mm.
we had to chase down different protocols. But because of that, I think she extended her life, and
Wow.
and that's always been part of my makeup.
Mm.
That it's up to you who get sick to uh, chase down whatever you can do to extend your life and make it a little better. And it certainly wasn't without pain and suffering along the way for her on her part.
Mm.
But she had that English medal, that just wouldn't give up, and God bless her. She she turned that in through a variety of different ways, but never. I mean, we had friends in the clinics and whatnot that refused to take any kind of treatment, and the next time we were there, they were gone, and I I encourage people not to be too hasty about not to take an approach because of just what you read. I'd rather go the other direction. You know what I mean? And so that's just how I look at things, and I trace that back to the fact that as a skinny little 7-year-old, I managed to I had to drop out of school for a year and make it up later on. And I
Wow.
remember to this day, in the summertime, the second time I got it, walking across the hardwood floors in the summertime, there was just before air conditioning, hot summertime, the fans are on, all that, and then just collapsing, and then them finding out that I had this heart condition, and so I've always been on the side of experiment and you know the medical field and trying to not crazy wacky stuff. I mean, you
Right.
want some, some stuff is out there. It's all purely anecdotal, but take your condition and physician heal thyself. There's a lot of work to be done on your part, and not asking others what to do. At
Well,
the end of the day, you've got to make your own decision.
I pray we still have those options with what's coming in at us
Well, I
in these
wouldn't,
next.
really, of course you'll have those options. Nobody's going to take anything away from you. Don't worry about that. Be active. Don't be passive.
Well, I agree with
Put
that.
it to somebody else.
Mhm,
I'm not going to get into the politics of any of this now,
mhm.
but it takes up a lot of time, all this hand wringing stuff going on right now with some of my friends. And it is a deflection for taking action yourself.
Hey, I
But,
marched on
yeah,
Washington once, and I'll
so,
do it again.
well, but that isn't, you know, you, yeah, you, you cannot have others live your life. You have to take action, you know,
Mhm.
you know, and so whatever it is, I mean, after all, you and I didn't go through the Second World War like our parents did.
Mm-mm.
They went through that. We weren't in Europe when our cities got bombed. You're each given your own set of snakes to get through. You know, every every generation has their own good versus evil to get through, and your own pathway to find. Everybody's got to find it themselves. It doesn't stop when I'm 80. It didn't, it started when I was born and brought into this life. So
Mm.
everybody's got it. I don't think there's any quick uh, solution to just talking about what's out of your control. You know, I think you have to put your life in. You have to control your life as best you can, and then the
Absolutely.
key is as best you can.
Absolutely. Okay,
Right,
so
and
let's
that's it.
talk about places where you had control. So how hot tuna? Why hot tuna? What Jefferson Airplane, this great thing. You guys are making magic. Why hot tuna?
Well, we enjoy playing together. Ever since I first met you in 1957, he was just a guy I liked. I was easy to be around him, but there's something about him. Uh, and when he started to develop into the genre that we now know as Yorma, but when he started working with his early influences, and I'm playing guitar, we're in the Jefferson Airplane, we're getting to do anything we want to do with the music. We'd be in hotel rooms, we'd be playing, he'd be playing a Reverend Gary Davis tune, and I'd be playing with him, and we'd be playing these songs together that I hadn't played before. I appreciated the music, but I'd never tried to play a bass for it. We found ourselves, hey, nobody's really done this. Here, Yorma's a standalone player, doesn't need anybody else. But when I was trying to learn how to add bass to that kind of music in the finger picking world, and because the thumb's going like this, it's always there. We found that I could use those elements that I'd learned in classical music of moving from the bass into the cello range, and the music would hold its own because he's working bass lines on the guitar. Now, in a linear guitar player who's playing either a melodic line or playing strumming a rhythm, then the bass is required to do pattern playing much to hold the beat together and all of that. In this world with Yorma playing with the finger picking, I could move into my own partial chord and melodic range and play music like in his song Been So Long. was just able to do so much more in the piece. I'm able to work in with play some melody in there. I'm able to play and support the chords. I'm able to orchestrate and put different emphasis on different sections of the song. And it was a world going back to that influence of the Jimmy Jufrey Three, or or Johnny Smith with Stan Getz and Moonlight in Vermont. It was playing jazz, but we weren't playing jazz in the sense of playing from the American standard, songbook standards. So uh, it was just fun and great to do. And as we got into it, we wanted to do it more. So you need to book some shows. When you book some shows, that takes some time. When that takes some time, it takes away from Jefferson Airplane. And we're trying to do both at once. And then we're never, as soon as we finish one, we're back doing the other. And pretty soon there's no time left in the year. And we decided to work on the one rather than the other. And musically, the Jefferson Airplane, don't forget, everybody's young as they started out. All these songwriters, as they started to fan out, as the years go by, in the airplane, it would only be so each person will only get a few songs a night, and after a while, you want to develop more and do more for
Hmm.
everybody. So, I think it began what made it special and unique in the first, say, 5 years, began to be a bit confined in the
Mm.
last 2 years, and so we decided that, and it wasn't done too delicately either. We decided it was just too much to have be playing all the time and never any rest to reflect and develop and create and do new. I mean, that's an age-old thing with bands. You sign a contract. The contract says every January produce an album. But that doesn't always work out with a life with life decisions and life timing of when you get inspiration, when you're able to work on stuff, and when you're able to go out the road and play it, and when you're maybe, who knows, maybe even going to have a life at home. So, uh, all that. After a while, there's only so many hours in the day, and you're not uh, 21 anymore. As
So
you
you,
start to
you did
develop.
come back to the Starship like in 1990 for a bit.
Well, I came back and played with Paul. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. And he was forming some stuff, and I wanted to keep some things going on. And it was good for me just to play again. To play with the stuff I was doing with the Army, but I wanted to keep in early '90s, and just keep some things going on. And so yeah, I talked to Paul, and don't forget we had the KBC band together.
Right.
Yeah, which uh, um, I suggested that we get together and do some playing too, because with that format, I like the format, and I wanted to play some of Paul's stuff and play in that
Hmm.
format. And when we came back in '89 to do a Jefferson Airplane reunion, I was all for that, because there were certain things I missed out of that world too. You know,
But wasn't there a
so
problem? Didn't you stop when he called it the Jefferson Airplane reunion? I read something that you stopped because there was a legality with Grace or something about
no,
calling it the
not us.
airplane.
That was with a group of people that saw calling themselves Jefferson Starship, and that had nothing to do with us.
Okay.
But anyway, things move on. We're covering a lot of years here.
Well, you've had a lot of years. And so speaking of a lot of years, you and Yorma, like almost 60 years and still making magic. I mean, I just saw you a few weeks ago. It's
Yeah, I
just
did great.
amazing. It's amazing. And still like friends and enjoying each other and laughing together and making
Well,
this magical music.
I've thought you and I have talked about it. we watch other people, in bands, where they don't talk to each other for 2 years, 3 years, and we had a little period of time in the '80s when we were just so involved with our personal stuff that we'd put Hot Tuna down for a couple of years, and 3 or 4 years or so, because there's a saturation point with everything. But in the long run, you know, I say, Yorman says the reason we still like each other is because we've never had a band meeting, and and but I think the real reason is, our reference points can go back to our childhood,
Mm.
where he was over at my house and my mom would make him a roast beef sandwich, or I'd be over at his grandma's house, and before we knew anything like this was ever going to happen, uh, we weren't groomed like today's kids are, where their parents are grooming them for a life of stardom. Uh, we our reference points don't go back to just a business, a coming together as, say, the Jefferson Airplane.
Hmm.
If we had just meant then, you know. Um, so I think we can draw on reference points that have nothing to do with music,
Right.
as Fred said, and nothing to do with the business of music. And I think that I've always counted that as a blessing.
Um, Jay Beal is saying he'd love to hear a bit about SVT. And
Yeah, during that period where Yorm and I stopped playing together for a period, um, uh, I found this gentleman, Brian Marnell, through one of my lawyer friends, Brian Rohan. May he rest in peace, who did so
mm,
much work within the Bay Area of the bands and legal work and whatnot. And he's a he was part of that whole Irish faction too. With Terrence Hallahan and all that bunch in San Francisco. With us, plenty of stories with all of that. But uh, and he had played with a band. He's 10 years younger than me. He played with a band in Marin County. We knew Bill Gibson. Bill Gibson, of course, went with Huey Lewis. Huey Lewis in the News later on was a
hmm.
fabulous drummer. I just talked to him a few weeks ago. Um, and Nick Buck had been playing with us in Hot Tuna, and we started rehearsing my house, and we put a band together. Uh, 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 and of course, this was the height of a lot of the new wave and punk stuff that was going on, and we played around San Francisco at the Mabuhay and did a number of shows and put out a couple of albums. And it was a good aggressive part of my life. I was trying to change maybe perhaps my bass style a little bit, because a lot of people weren't appreciating a lot of notiness to the bass and melodic and all of that. So I went for a bit of a more basic approach in the industry, no instrument, no pun intended, but also a little more aggressive playing. And it ran its course for a couple of years and had a great time. And of course, there was a tragic ending to Brian Marnell that involved drugs, totally
Mm,
through mistaken issue with drugs and aspirating and choking and
mm,
passing on and dying. And that affected me a lot too. Uh, 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 but getting back into that subject, we were talking about drugs and sobriety. At that period of time, I had gone, after the speed skating sessions and all that, and really cleaning up my act, I'd gone back out into the world in the bad '80s again.
mm,
And getting through those '80s uh, into the '90s and meeting my wife Diana Balfour, where we both decided to stop everything. Uh, February 25th, 1990. Uh,
Oh, you did it together.
we did it together, but separately. It was interesting.
Oh,
That was. We had meant, uh, but uh, she was she had lost her husband later on, and we had met, and we just individually decided to not do it anymore. It was interesting. It was interesting how that came about. It wasn't a discussion. Uh, so I managed to start day one, and I tried it many times before with a little yellow sticky on the wall. Put one up there.
You did it on your own. You didn't go to program?
No, now I will say though that the DUI that I got in the year before, uh, during that period of time with the Jefferson Airplane reunion in 1989, my lawyer had managed to delay any activity for a year. Where finally, when I had to appear in court it wasn't exactly an incentive, but well before that date, I think in February, I was supposed to appear in court in March or later on. I had voluntarily stopped and put a day up and started going to a program in Santa Monica, the Janus program, and later on to AA. Uh, uh, the interesting thing was I really wanted to do it this time. You know,
Mm.
I had hit bottom. The day one was
Did
after
you, can you,
the
do you
day
have,
one
could
was
you tell us what your bottom, like an example of a
the
part of your
bottom was that
bottom?
well that was that morning.
The DUI?
I had finished a whole bottle of 100 proof Stoli, and in the
Mm,
morning I had an epiphany, and I saw it in front of me, and I
mm,
just classic, you know, the cliche, the road, the forked road. This when I was going to die, and this when I was, and I
mm,
had just met this person, and I said if I didn't want to affect other people in a negative way with my alcoholism. I said if I'm ever going to have a shot at happiness in life, it's going to be I have to take this road. I have to
mm.
take the clear road, and I have to face all this stuff that I've all the parts of my personality that I've been trying to avoid. And so the day one appeared, day two appeared, day three, and pretty soon I got a year, and then I got 2 years, and now I'm up to 34 years, and we'll see.
Fantastic.
You
Very inspiring. As a 22-year-old myself, that's very inspiring.
and but I was this was 1990, so when I was 46, that's how and I'd lived in New York uh, for about 4 years, from '85 to '89, and I went into a couple programs there, I think the longest I'd lasted was 45 days or something like that before I went back out again. But and I'd seen a doctor there, and there was some spots appearing on my liver, and he says, "Listen, Jack," and I mean, I'm a product of I can be affected by shame, so. Uh, he said, Jack, in a very personal way. He knew who I was and all of that kind of stuff. He said, Jack,
Hmm.
if you keep this up, you're going to die from cirrhosis of the liver. And but the medical world, okay, here's concrete proof. There's there's physical deterioration with my liver. You know, you know, this way, if you continue with this, and so the 2 years later, when I finally put that one up on the wall, that one stuck, uh, uh, and uh, and I started to deal with getting a sense of myself and who I was and the things that I was afraid of, uh, uh, and slowly start to face that which I'd shoved away, in my psyche, uh, a number of things, and of course, um, then when Diana and I got together in the early '90s there, and we started our life together, it was in sobriety, so
Wow.
that was. Uh, such a monumental cornerstone to our relationship.
Mm. Speaking of Diana, I think it was Mark who mentioned that that bass that you hold in your hands is
Yes,
named after her. So,
yeah, they are. They're the Diana
mm,
series of bases,
mm.
and I must mention uh, Deborah Evans, who is my betrothed. I'm engaged. I'm going to be married at 80.
Congratulations.
We she was part of the caregiving team of Diana when she was getting stem cell treatment, and she was part of that aspect of it that we had met a long time ago. So it's I'm grateful that all this is is part of my life. It is all a continuum of my life, and that there's no hidden agendas between any of what I've done in my life or who I am or who I've known or anything. Uh, it's I'm grateful to be here to be able to play the bass and to enjoy life and have my Chester.
And your
Who's
Chester.
around the corner? But in any
Bef
case, it's when I started to develop these instruments, Tom Rebecki built this. Tom Rebecki is the master builder, luthier, and I approached him in 2014. I was playing a Guild B30, uh, which is a flat top, round hole bass guitar, and I was playing it, and I was bemoaning the lack of true big bass tone. Uh,
I was just going to ask you about your tone. You talk so much about your tone being your signature, and somebody on it, Mark asked, somebody asked here about uh, how do you achieve your distinctive tone?
well, I think everybody has a distinctive tone. When I teach, and I taught for 23 years out at the Fur Peace Ranch, Norma
Yes.
Calkin and Vanessa Calkin's Fur Peace Ranch, I talk about tone a lot, but it's it's something I can't give someone else. I can just try to say, pay attention to the way you really sound, not the way you think you sound.
Mm.
And I always have said, tone is the seductive mistress. Tone is the thing that draws you into the room, whether it's a vocalist or whether it's a cellist, whether it's a guitarist, whatever instrument it is. It's the thing. It isn't the notes they're playing or how many notes they're playing or even the melody. That's the thing that draws you in.
Oh.
And I think that, at least to me, that's what I've always been drawn in by.
Mhm.
It isn't just what you play; it's 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 that sound that you create, and I think that's what has always driven my playing.
And yours is so distinctive. We always know when it's a Jack Cassidy playing. It's impossible not to know. Your sound, your tone is completely distinctive. And I am so grateful to you, Jack, for taking this time to do this with us
Because it's
today.
easy, and you're just up the street, is it? Yeah,
Yes, and
you're over the hill. Yeah,
over the hill, and we
yeah.
we we pre-COVID would have been doing this in person, and who knows, maybe we can do one in person
Well,
sometime.
this is great what you do, though. I mean, really, I looked you up a little bit, and checked on some of this stuff, and it's great. You've always keep everybody relaxed and so that they kind of tell different stuff than is usually told in interviews, so to speak.
Well, it's been my great honor and privilege. I started to tell you before we came on the air, I really did buy a Rickenbacker back in 87.
Well, do you
And
still have it?
I do not
What?
still have it.
What?
I sold it to my boyfriend who helped me buy it. And he's playing it because I stopped playing it and it needed to
All
be
right.
played because it was
All right. Well, listen. Yeah,
gorgeous.
if you want to get back into playing, just come down here. I'll show you.
Well, so do you still, that was my last question. Do you still teach? Can people?
Well, I'm teaching through Furpy's Ranch online in exactly this format with the Zoom session. And
Fantastic.
so, as a matter of fact, I've got this set up here with with an ATM camera setup along with a three camera system. So, for instance, I can show on the side here. Let me throw a little more light on this. Let's see. There. So with this system, and with the camera, I can
Oh, wow.
this. So
Hmm.
the right hand take the if I want, and I have one. I think I've got the.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I can show the left hand take there, or maybe up here. So
Fantastic.
let's
And
see.
and you've got your email address here in your little Zoom square so people can contact you if they want to
Yeah, yeah,
study.
sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you so much. And I look forward to more you. I hope there's more you in my life.
All
I
righty.
certainly hope
I'm
there's
right
more hot
here.
tuna. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so
Well, thank you
much.
so much for this. I really appreciate it.